12 communication mistakes that I see a lot of guys make, starting with number 1, talking to fill the silence. When you're having a conversation with somebody, whether it's a friend, whether it's a colleague at work, whether it's a girl that you're taking out on a date, there will be moments when you both don't really have anything to say. And what a lot of people do wrong is they find the silence uncomfortable and they think it's awkward. So what they do is they rush to fill the silence with verbal diarrhea, as I like to describe it, with words that don't really make sense. You don't really have something of value to say. You're just intimidated that the silence will make you look bad or will make the encounter awkward. And this happens a lot, to be fair, with guys on dates, especially if the girl that they're sat in front of is extremely beautiful in their eyes, that they're very intimidated about not being seen as confident enough. Right? A lot of guys find the silence awkward. They start playing around with their fingers. They start to really get agitated and twitchy, and the girl can feel that. Like she can notice that. You're not sat still, you're just very nervous. And she can almost see the word that you're about to say before you've even said it, right? You're like prepping yourself to get the word out. And it just makes you look extremely apprehensive. Right? What I would advise you to do, gentlemen, is embrace the silence. Embrace it. If you're sat somewhere with a girl outside, maybe there's some beautiful scenery besides you, right? An ocean or a nice park or whatever, and it goes silent for a few seconds, embrace the silence. I mean, it's rarely ever library level silence, right? I mean, there's going to be other people talking around you. There's going to be the sound of cars driving by perhaps, or, music playing in the background if you're in a restaurant. So it's rarely ever just absolute silence. Just to enjoy it, If you sit still, you might be able to listen to maybe a song that's playing in the background and be like, you hear that song? Do you know who it's by? You could use the silence to your advantage. Or maybe if you're sat with a girl and you're both not saying anything, you hear someone walk by, say something really silly to his friend or whatever, you both laugh about it. If you were just constantly talking, you wouldn't have heard that, right? So relax. Stay composed. Silence is not your enemy. Okay? In the negotiation in business, when you say your price, you stay silent after. Silence can actually be a strategic tool to help you progress in business, right? In your negotiations. If you say your price and then you carry on talking afterwards, they haven't had the opportunity to digest your price, to think about it. And it shows that you're nervous about your price, which is why you're kind of softening the blow by carrying on talking. No, say your price and stay quiet. Is it awkward? No, it's not. See, you only make interactions awkward with people if you view the interaction as awkward, right? If there's a brief moment of silence and you think, oh God, no, this is awkward, then you're going to do something that is awkward in that moment. But if you just embrace it and you're like, you know what? Yeah, I'm going to say my price and I'm going to see what they say. I'm not going to talk and try and make them feel comfortable about it. No, this is my price. Okay? So that's the first mistake. The second mistake is overloading with facts and not adding emotion in your conversations. Right? There's a saying which I heard from a very successful speaker many years ago. He said, Ali, facts tell, stories sell. I'm going to say that again. Facts tell, stories sell. It's rare that you just win over somebody in terms of business or by selling a product by just simply stating the features. It has 64 gigabytes of RAM, or it has 300 horsepower. The battery life, no one cares. Okay? No one cares. People buy emotionally, then just justify with logic. I'm going to say that again. People buy emotionally, then justify it with logic. When you see Apple market their products, they don't market their products with a list of the features. They have a very exciting story to share, or an image that just draws you in. I saw a big billboard in London of a waterfall. I didn't even know it was an Apple billboard, right? It was just a couple holding hands looking at a waterfall together. And at the very bottom, I noticed it said, shot on the iPhone 16 Pro Max. Then I was, okay. So what Apple are trying to do here is make you attracted to the idea of going on exciting adventures with your partner and capturing incredible memories. With what? With your iPhone 16 Pro Max. Okay? They don't list out that, it's got 88 megapixels. They don't do that, right? So when you're talking to people, think about how you could incorporate stories, experiences that happen to you, right? Combine the facts with emotion. Okay? The third mistake, gentlemen, is saying I think or maybe too often. When you say I think, what it shows is that you're not very sure of what you're saying. Now, look, we're not going to get everything right. We're going to make factual errors when we're talking to our friends about something, right? Sometimes you think you know the exact details, but it turns out you're wrong. So that's why people often say, I think. But if you know something to be true, say it. And don't add I think before it. It just shows that you're not sure of yourself. It shows that you're not confident in the information you've acquired. I think. No, you know. Stop saying I think, you know. Be sure of yourself. If you turn out to be completely wrong, well then, be open to being corrected, And you should never be upset when somebody corrects you if they have the exact, detail. That's the way, things should be, right? People should be able to correct you if you're wrong, and you shouldn't be upset, right? It's the same when you say the word maybe. Maybe you're not sure. Maybe. And especially when you're talking to a girl and you're looking to set a date with her, don't be saying, well, maybe we can do next Tuesday. Maybe we can do next Saturday. Maybe. Just looks very wishy-washy. You don't look like you know what you're doing. You look like a confused guy who doesn't have a control over his schedule. And it doesn't communicate to the other person that you value their presence. If you really wanted to see somebody, you wouldn't say, well, maybe I can see you on Tuesday. You'll say, no, I'm going to pick you up Tuesday evening. We're going to go somewhere. Put on something nice. Right? No, well, maybe we can do. No, there's no maybes. Okay? The fourth mistake is speaking in a very monotone way. Just the same fucking tone throughout the conversation. That just doesn't show any passion. And it's just very fucking boring. Somebody could be talking about the most exciting thing ever, but if the tone is monotone, if it's just very robotic throughout, you just clock out. You just zone out. You just don't want to focus. Well, you can't focus even if you wanted to, right? You just sat there like, what? So add a bit more tonality. If there's something that's very exciting, raise your voice, talk about it Show that you're excited about that particular thing. Tonality is something they teach you in sales. Well, good sales managers will teach you about the importance of tonality. There's a very famous scene in The Wolf of Wall Street, the movie, right? Where Leonardo DiCaprio is playing Jordan Belfort, and he picks up the phone, and you can see how excellent Jordan Belfort was at sales. Now, put his immoral practices to one side, he was a good salesperson. We can't knock that, right? And Leonardo DiCaprio played him very well in that scene. He was like, "Hey, John, you mailed my company a postcard a few weeks ago about some, whatever the initial script was." And then it says, "Something just came across my desk, John. It is perhaps the best thing that I've seen in the last 6 months. If you got 60 seconds, I'd like to share the idea with you. Got a minute?" Name of the company, Aerotime International. It is a cutting-edge firm out of the Midwest seeking imminent patent approval on our next generation of radar detectors with both huge military and civilian application. Now, right now, John, the stock trades at 10 cents share. An hour, I don't know, indicates it could get a heck of a lot higher. Your profit on a mere $6,000 investment will be upwards of $60,000. Geez, man, that could pay off my mortgage. What did he say? "Geez, man, that's my mortgage." Yeah, you could pay off your mortgage. John, I never ask you to judge me on my winners. I ask you. Anyways, that was it. I've gone a little bit sidetracked there. But you see, when you watch that, you can feel the energy. Now, look, he was selling some bullshit stock. Forget that. But when you're talking about something that you're passionate about, show through your tonality that you're passionate about it, right? Don't be talking about something that you really like in the same monotone way, because people will just zone out. People will stop listening to what you have to say, and oftentimes a lot of them would just look at their watch thinking, when the fuck is this guy going to finish what he's saying? Because I don't want to be here anymore. You know, this is really fucking awkward, and I'm getting tired just listening to this guy. Somebody please help me. Somebody please walk past and tell me something so I can just distract this guy. So, people just don't want to be there, right? So a lack of vocal variety drains energy from your words. Even confident statements can fall flat in if your tone stays the same. Okay, gentlemen? So show through your tonality. And it takes practice, by the way. Sales is not something you can just master. The tonality is not something you can just master immediately. It takes a bit of practice. Number 5 is ignoring nonverbal cues. So oftentimes we focus heavily on the delivery, and what we miss is what the other person's body language is saying. Crossed arms, tapping fingers, or a lack of eye contact can often signal disinterest or discomfort. So what I want you guys to focus on is, are my words hitting home with this person? Is this person looking, if I'm talking to somebody, for example, and they're just looking away and distracted, and I know they're not being fully present in that conversation, I just stop talking to them. Either about that particular subject that is not interesting to them, or just at all, I just stop speaking to them completely. Because I'm not going to waste my energy trying to hammer home a point to somebody that is just not there. Either they don't understand what I'm saying and the conversation is way above their comprehension, or they're just disinterested. Either way, if I feel that they're not there with me, I'm going to cease to have a conversation about that topic. I posted a video yesterday on my Instagram where I said, people will only understand you from their highest level of enlightenment. I'm going to say that again. People will only understand you from their highest level of enlightenment. So if you're going into depth about something with somebody that you feel just doesn't get it, or they're so disinterested in the conversation, stop having that conversation with them. Some people you just got to have level 2 conversations with. Other people you can have level 7, level 8 conversations with. They really sit down and they're with you, they're present, they're bouncing ideas across, philosophical points across, and you really feel like you're being understood, you're being challenged. And those conversations are usually the most enjoyable, but not everybody will have conversations of that caliber with you. Some people are just going to have really basic conversations with you about, how's your dog? How's your kid, Charlie? You know, and you just got to have really basic conversations with people like that. Getting into a deep philosophical point about ancient Egypt or about, you know, whatever. It's just not worthy of your time. Okay? And if you get really emotionally anxious and frustrated when people don't get your point, it probably means that you're not very socially intelligent. And you talk to everybody the same way. You got to read the room, right? You got to be able to figure out who's worthy of having those conversations with you and who isn't, right? Not worthy as in, you know, is this person, is he at my level? No. That person might be great when it comes to communicating about sports. They might be really into sports. And for somebody else who's also into sports, they can really click. But just know where to expend your energy. They teach us this in sales, right? It's better to focus your energy on somebody that's looking to purchase the product that you're selling, in the market for it, than to try and waste your time selling somebody something that they don't want or need. Right? Point number 6, the 6th mistake, gentlemen, that I see a lot of guys make when it comes to communication is interrupting to prove a point. You know, cutting somebody off sometimes feels like a power move, right? You're asserting your dominance, but it often damages rapport, right? It signals that you value your words more than theirs, which makes people clock out, which makes them not want to have conversations with you because they feel like there's no point. He'll just bark, he'll just raise his voice, he'll interrupt, and he'll make me look stupid, which it does, by the way. You know, especially if you're in a social setting and every time somebody speaks, you talk over them, you know, you're disrespecting them. What you're communicating to the rest of the group there is that I don't give a shit about this guy's opinions or beliefs. I'm going to talk over him. I don't respect him. That's what it shows, right? I don't respect his presence in this group. He might as well not be here, right? Which is, you know, not a good thing. You don't want to be seen as that guy, because even other people will start noticing that about you and they'll think, bro, why are you interrupting? Let the guy speak, right? Even if you're correct in what you're saying, gentlemen, people remember the interruption. Okay, not the insight. So a better approach is let them finish, then acknowledge their point before sharing yours. This makes your perspective land stronger because it's layered on top of active listening. Then people will be like, okay, well, he digested the point, he acknowledged the point, and then he offered his perspective. That's a lot more respectful. And also intelligent as well, because you're taking the time to digest this person's point, which means that you're really thinking about it. You're actively listening and taking it on board. Then you're offering your response instead of just barking over somebody's point without even knowing what they're saying. Okay, that's what makes a good debater. You know, I was watching Mehdi Hassan, right? He's a political commentator. Now, whether you agree or disagree with his political stance, he's a phenomenal speaker and a debater. And what he said in an interview that I watched was, what makes him a great debater is he knows in vivid detail so much about what the other person is saying. He's really researched what they're saying. So when they debate with him, he's clued up on the topic that they're speaking about. But he's also somebody that you can see is an excellent listener, right? And he's always open to being corrected. You know, I've seen clips of him saying, well, if you can show me the facts, I'll change my mind. I will be, you know what? I'll agree with what you're saying. You know, and there have been times that people have presented facts to him, right? and he's taken that on board. So that's an important thing for us men to remember, is that if somebody corrects you, it's not always personal. Sometimes they want to help you, understand the situation a little bit better, which helps you articulate your next response better as well. So you're not working off of fake information, right? So active listening, allow people to finish what they have to say and then offer your perspective. Number 7, the next communication mistake that I see a lot of guys make is over-explaining. Men oftentimes drown their message in excessive backstory or unnecessary detail. And oftentimes this is done to avoid misunderstandings, right? You don't want people to get you wrong or whatever, right? So you talk about every minor detail, but what that does is it makes your point less clear and more forgettable, because there's just so much fat and you're not cutting straight to the meat, right? And people become disinterested. People start clocking out when you're just talking and talking and talking and talking, and you're not getting to the point. So lead with the core message first, then add details if people ask you, right? But if you're talking, well, I woke up and then I got in my car and then I drove 2 hours. And on the way to driving, actually, there was a sign that said, road closed. So I had to go another way. Anyways, I got to the place I got to. And, for some reason, it was really quite cold over there. I wasn't expecting. And then it takes you maybe you're talking about something to do with your manager or whatever, but there's just so much unnecessary detail. Cut to the actual main bulk of the story. And then if someone asks you, well, what else, you can then clarify after that, okay? The next communication mistake is avoiding vulnerability. Now, look, when I say vulnerability, I don't mean open up about everything that's ever happened to you in life and just unloading on somebody. No. But when you keep everything surface level, people don't really connect with you very well. It creates distance, right? In relationships, this feels like emotional unavailability. And in leadership, it makes you seem unrelatable because people don't know anything about you. That's why when you share some of your down moments with people, especially if you're somebody who's a personal trainer, a motivational speaker, a sales manager, right? When you tell people, listen, man, I was there. I was very overweight. I looked at myself in the mirror and I thought I looked disgusting. My self-esteem was down. I felt ugly, right? When you paint a story of a time in your life where things were not great, and then you talk about how you improved it, people feel like they can relate to you, because not every person is walking around with 8% body fat, 6'2", making 6 figures a year, right? Nobody's born that way. But even those that have always really worked on themselves, they are the anomaly, should I say. There's not many of those compared to the majority of people who are, overweight. They're not making the money they want to make. So it makes you more relatable. Now, when it comes to relationships, there is a caveat, I would say. As a man, don't unload on your woman in terms of your emotions, right? Don't talk about your childhood traumas and avoid crying in front of her unless it's something really serious that's happened, right? Somebody passed away. There's going to be moments in your life where, you can't really keep it together, and that's okay. You're not a robot. You're a human being with emotions, right? But there's a lot of guys that often feel that if I open up to my girl about everything that troubles me, she will feel more attracted and closer to me. No. They may say that, but that's far from the truth. What women say versus what they respond to are oftentimes two different things. They may say, I want a guy that can just really cry in front of me. I just feel I connect with him more. Don't do that. Don't do that, gentlemen. First of all, if it's about a minor trivial thing, you shouldn't be crying anyways. There are guys out there that are so sensitive, they'll cry about anything. And that's not good because it shows that you lack emotional composure, right? She should look at you as a source of strength. I talk about the lighthouse example. Despite the waves crashing at the lighthouse remains firm, standing, a sign and a beacon of hope for those in the treacherous ocean, right? You can't have two emotional people in a relationship. You both can't be crying at the same time, right? So if it's about trivial life matters, you shouldn't be crying. Get it together. Man up. I know I sound really misogynistic right now, probably to a lot of people. But I think it's very important to not invest in the problem too much. The more you focus on something being painful and upsetting, the more upset you will feel and the more pain you will feel. But if you disregard something, you say, that ain't gonna fucking break me. I always find a way through. I grow through what I go through. When life tests me, I always come out on top. Not in an arrogant way, but in a way of encouraging yourself. I'm not going to break down over small things. Right? I lost a bit of money, I can make it back. I got fired from my job, I'll find another one. Right? Point number 9, gentlemen. The next mistake that I see in communication is overusing jargon or smart words. Now look, it's very normal to want to impress people with industry terms or complex vocabulary, but that can oftentimes alienate people, right? And it may signal that you're talking at them, not with them. And this goes back to the point that I mentioned earlier about reading the room. Not everybody will understand these very fancy terms that you've just picked up this week, that you're using when you're communicating with them. So just identify, who you're talking to. And I don't want to say talk at their level because that may sound like I'm being derogatory when I say that. But just simplify your communication style so that they can understand you. I'm not saying dumb it down, although it sounds that way, but just talk in a way that they will understand. And that, by the way, takes a great deal of skill. It does. In sales, this is something you learn, being a chameleon, adjusting the way that you communicate so that it resonates with somebody. There's nothing fake about it, by the way. If I'm talking to a person who doesn't speak English as their first language, I'm not going to be using all these fancy terms like introspection, comprehension, all these big words. I'm not going to be using those. I'm going to be simplifying it, right? Number 10, the next mistake that I see in communication is passive-aggressive responses. Oftentimes, guys, to avoid direct confrontation, but still express irritation, we often become sarcastic, right? We may say things in a jokey way to dig at somebody. But what that often does is it damages trust, all right? And it escalates tension. So one thing I would say, gentlemen, is be direct, but be respectful. Instead of saying, wow, nice of you to show up finally, say something like, I was expecting you earlier. Is everything okay? Now, they will get that you're talking about them being late, but you're not saying it in a condescending way. It's still respectful, but they kind of get the hint. It's not sarcastic to the extent where they feel like you're taking the piss out of them, but they get the hint. You know what? Shit, I was late, man. It's not a good look, right? Number 11, talking more than you listen. This is another mistake that I see when it comes to communication. Over-communicating, gentlemen, without listening leaves people feeling unseen. And in social settings, this reads as arrogance, right? In work, it makes you miss key information. because you're always talking, right? Sit down and listen to what is being said. There's a saying, the quietest person in the room is the most dangerous in the room. And oftentimes in negotiation settings, that is true, because you're being armed with what every single person is being said. And then when you finally deliver your point, it is calculated. It's not random. It's not you just impulsively saying something. Think about this, gentlemen. Think about this for a second. A lot of us communicate impulsively. We don't know what we're saying. We haven't actually comprehended the words that are coming out of our mouths. Which is why oftentimes when you impulsively speak at somebody, and I use the word at specifically here because you're not really communicating with somebody, you're just saying words at somebody, hurling words. Oftentimes you feel afterwards like, what did I even just say? Like you forget what you said because you weren't consciously thinking about the words that were coming out of your mouth. And that could also go against you in a business setting because you might say something because you weren't paying attention and that person takes it on board. Right? You might have slipped up and said the wrong number, whatever, because you're just speaking impulsively. Okay? So listen. It doesn't make you look weak if you're listening to people. Now, at the same time, don't just be too quiet and become a mouse. And people are like, are you going to say something? No, like interact in the conversation, but don't constantly be talking, right? You know, in an interview, if you're looking to get a new job, ask a question to the interviewer. Get involved. Don't just let them talk at you. Oh, the role is this is what you're going to be doing. And you're like quiet because you're desperate for a job and you don't want to say anything, that could be used against you. No. Communicate. They want to see you interact with them, right? Use it as an opportunity to showcase a little bit more about your personality and the things that you do, right? And last but not least, gentlemen, and I kind of touched on this a little bit earlier, point number 12 when it comes to communication mistakes that I see is not tailoring your message to the audience. Oftentimes we use the same tone, the same detail level and style across all contexts, right? Whether it's in a boardroom, a pub, at home. And this ignores the fact, gentlemen, that audiences have different expectations, right? As I said earlier, meet people where they are. If you're talking to some guy in the pub, don't be talking to him like you're talking to a high-level executive for a fintech firm in London, right? Talk to him in the way he normally talks to other people, right? Adjust your vocabulary, your tone, the pace. Okay? A direct, for example, concise tone works well in a meeting. And warmth and curiosity work better in a social setting or in a romantic setting. Okay? So, gents, hopefully these points have given you something to think about. Let me know if there's something else that you believe is a mistake that oftentimes happens in communication. I'd love to get your perspective. Thanks for watching, gents, and I'll catch you in the next video.